My name is JC Sylvie, and welcome to the Loudoun Impact podcast. We interview purpose-driven leaders right here in Loudoun County, Virginia. My guest today is Kristen Umstattd. Kristen is the Loudoun County Supervisor rep for Leesburg.
Yep.
And really happy that you can join us today, Kristen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, JC. Happy to be here.
Crazy times, and I appreciate you jumping on the call on short notice. But as you can imagine, the topic of today is COVID in phase 1. And when is Western Loudoun going to open for business, or at least be allowed to enter into phase 1 of the relaxation?
So, JC, as you probably know, Supervisor Caleb Kirshner and Supervisor Tony Buffington, who represent the rural parts of the county, and I all joined in on a letter to Governor Northam last night. And our reason is that we fundamentally disagree with his decision to keep Loudoun shut down, especially Leesburg and Western Loudoun shut down for another 2 weeks or more. We don't know. It's been a moving target, I think, across the country. But our thinking is right now we are looking at potentially a 10% unemployment rate in this county if we remain shut down. And we're looking at losing 25% of our small businesses permanently, not just temporarily. That has the three of us extremely worried. Now, I'm not going to criticize the other board members who support continued shutdown.
Sure.
I mean, it's a hard decision for everybody in these circumstances, but Tony and Caleb and I look at the fact that, you know, in New York State, 66% of the new COVID cases are among people who have stayed at home and have been following lockdown rules. And here we looked at when the biggest spike came in COVID cases here, and it was 6 weeks into our lockdown. So lockdowns don't appear to be preventing viral spread. And, you know, when we first talked about lockdowns, the assumption was we would all be at risk eventually of getting the virus. It was just to spread out the patient load on the hospitals. Well, if we look at Loudoun's position relative to the rest of Northern Virginia, and the other Northern Virginia chairs wanted to lock down for 2 more weeks at least, we are doing better than Fairfax, Arlington, Prince William.
Right.
The numbers are very different here and much lower here. But we are seeing our constituents out of work for 2 full months and more, and they cannot afford to pay rent. And the eviction moratorium is going to go away. They cannot afford to put food on the table for their families. And most of them, the vast majority of them and the vast majority of Americans are not at risk of serious consequences from the virus. For some folks, it is deadly, obviously.
Sure.
But we should put our resources and our efforts into better protecting those folks, but letting the rest of Virginia, including Loudoun County, get back to work. Because right now we're destroying people's livelihood. We're destroying their ability to achieve their dreams, and we're destroying small business. And that is just that's gonna tumble us into a deep, deep recession and possibly even a depression. And we don't have to go there.
Right. I agree. I look at the economic consequences, and it's not to make light of anybody's suffering or anybody's family member that is at risk in that category, because that's real. I won't deny that, but I don't think people are quite understanding those who are employed right now. The people who are not employed get it, but the people who are employed don't understand that we are so close to Depression era levels of both unemployment and economic activity. And there's no quick rebound from this. There's, a lot of people talk about a V-shaped recovery, and that as soon as there's a vaccine, boom, all of a sudden this massive global economy, all of a sudden overnight starts grinding away and starts functioning. What do you have to say about that?
It's not going to happen. It's always a slow slog out of any depression or even recession. I remember the saddest year for me going door to door in a campaign. I was running for reelection in 2010, and so many people were losing their jobs and therefore were at risk of losing their homes. And it took a long time to dig out of that. And I just, we're not strong enough to keep doing this to our citizens. We need to get them relief now, and we need to allow them to get back to work.
Sure. So what does that look like, Supervisor Umstattd? What do you propose?
What I would like to see the governor, what I would like is for us to get back to work immediately, to take extra measures to protect folks who are in nursing homes, retirement communities, try to make sure they are safe, but they're not safe now, and the lockdown has not made them any safer. But we need to open up this economy as quickly as we can. And I would allow businesses to reopen. If we want to require masks, we could do that.
Right.
But what worries me about the governor's plan is this incremental opening of businesses like restaurants and saying, well, you can only open at 50% capacity. What restaurant has a profit margin big enough to make a profit at that? They've got to be allowed to open at full capacity.
Yeah, that I didn't understand that, and I think they'd be better off just staying closed than operating at 50% capacity, because it's just not viable.
Yeah. And that's the case with many small businesses. Sure. But what we're doing now is the worst of both worlds. The governor has said we don't want to reopen until we have enough masks, until we have enough tests. We're not going to have enough masks and enough tests for quite some time.
Right.
And as you mentioned, the vaccine, that's our one maybe hopeful light at the end of the tunnel, but that's a year at least, if not 18 months out, if it ever can be developed. By that time, the country will be destroyed.
Right. So you're in favor of just getting right to it.
I would
do the best we can with social distancing, precautions, do what we can, but we have to learn to live with the virus, and that's just the reality, because you're exactly right. What if we never get a vaccine? Right. Then our only hope really is the herd immunity at that point.
Right.
And we've done all this to delay it, when we could have gotten there a little bit quicker and had an economy that was still functioning, at least partially, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
So you just want to just jump right to phase 3 for the governor's plan, correct?
I would jump to phase 3.
And is that just for Western Loudoun, or obviously you don't want to speak for the entire county? You just represent Leesburg, but how do you feel about the entire county?
What I wrote to the governor last week, just as a private citizen, was to open the economy up fully as soon as possible. We're just not going to get to those markers that he wants us to reach before we open up. We're not going to have, as I said, enough tests. We're not going to have enough personal protective equipment. And that could be months and months out. And my feeling is, put all our focus on protecting the most vulnerable among our citizens and let everything else open up. Because if we don't get everything opened up, we don't have the ability to protect our most vulnerable citizens.
Right. This is a lot of good information, Supervisor Umstattd. I'm glad we had a chance to to talk about COVID, although it's not something I look forward to doing. But I really love your approach. I haven't heard a political appointee or anybody in political office speak to it quite the way you have, and it's refreshing. I enjoy your point of view, and for me, I'm in agreement of it. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of blowback though from it.
Sure.
So if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind switching gears a little bit with you, since the podcast is about interviewing purpose-driven leaders here in Loudoun, and obviously you have a long career as a leader here in the county, and I'm really fascinated by your background. I'm sure a lot of my listeners do not know about it, but we share a little bit of a common background. We're both naval officers. Yes. Back in the 80s.
Yes.
And I'm sure a lot of people did not know that you were a naval officer back then. You were an analyst, a Soviet analyst, and working for the CIA as a Soviet naval analyst. And I remember back in the days of the mid 80s when, man, the Soviet Union was the focus of everything that we talked about. And I remember memorizing profiles of Soviet naval ships. Yes. And the specs of SA-2 and SA-9, all this different surface air systems and stuff. So tell us a little bit about your background with that.
Well, I mean, I went into the Navy after law school. So I went into the Navy because for two reasons. One, the young men I went to high school with were very worried about being drafted, and they were at risk. I was not, because I was female. Right. And I felt, if the guys are at risk, the women need to step up too. And so that was one reason I went into the military. Mm-hmm. The reason I chose the Navy is exactly what you outlined. The Soviet Navy at that point was the greatest threat to American freedom and our country. And I wanted to be part of the fight against it. Mm-hmm. So I had tried to get into intelligence, which may be where you ended up, but they had filled their quota for women. So I had a law degree, and so they made me a JAG officer. And as you know, being a JAG officer is not nearly as exciting as the old TV show portrayed it.
We won't tell anybody.
Yeah. But anyway, that's why I went in. And then when I left active duty, I stayed in the reserves and actually got into an intelligence unit at that time and translated Soviet naval documents into English for our intelligence community. And then from there to the CIA.
Well, I won't ask you about the CIA because that's probably right. I know better. So then you and your husband moved to Leesburg, Loudoun County, and you've had all kinds of held all kinds of offices in local government. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I ran for the town council in '92 and got a seat on the council, and then had a couple of unsuccessful elections going for other positions. Mm-hmm. I ran for mayor in '94. That was too early, but I did win the mayor's seat in 2002, and then was mayor for 14 years before I ran for the Board of Supervisors. I will tell you, being mayor is the coolest job in politics. It absolutely is. It is a lot of work. Right. If you talk to my friend, Mayor Kelly Burke, I will. She will tell you she has to operate out of her car and out of her kitchen, and it's true because she doesn't have an office. Right. None of the council do. Right. But it is really neat. You'll get a phone call at like 10 o'clock, and the tree went down in someone's yard, and so they'll ask if you can help find somebody to deal with that. Right. And you get to meet kids who think it's really cool to be mayor. Yeah. Their parents know it's not that cool, but the kids think it is. So it's fun.
I think it's a tough job. I talk to her probably once a month or so just because I'm interested in what's going on. But man, I don't envy, really, I don't envy any of you guys on whether town council or supervisors, whatever it is. It's a tough job. You don't get paid enough. So, you're definitely not doing it for the money. So what was it like at the dinner table as a kid when you were growing up?
Oh my gosh. Well, I grew up in a very conservative Republican household, which is so it's ironic I'm a Democrat, but
Right.
I was a Republican for a long time. And that grew out of my parents' concern about communism and Soviet Russia.
Right.
And at that time, it was the Soviet Union. And so I grew up helping my parents on political campaigns. They were always supporting Republican candidates, and we'd hand literature out at grocery stores, and we'd go door to door. We had a
Whoa.
big sound truck for Barry Goldwater. And
Oh, that's
so
funny.
all of this. So, and then I was a campus speaker for surrogate speaker for Ronald Reagan when he ran in 1980.
Holy
So that's what I grew up with, and it was fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
I came to love politics back then, and I still love it.
Yeah. Unbelievable. That's pretty neat. And we won't make it too political and ask you what changed in your politics why you're now a Democrat. We'll save that for another time.
All right.
So where have you been eating out these days? Do you have any good suggestions?
So, I mean, we try as a family to make sure we help Leesburg restaurants. So we've ordered, it's worked really well too. We've ordered from Jasmine, we've ordered from China King, Fireworks. So that generally, I mean, South Street Under, you can order from them. Friends of ours got their Easter meal, I think, from Sidebar.
Yep, they did a big meal, yeah.
Yeah, so we try to stay local. We try to stay in town, and our restaurants are doing a great job. You know, at the Village at Leesburg, I don't want to just promote the downtown, but the Village at Leesburg has a lot of fine restaurants that they'll deliver or provide curbside pickup. And I have a special fondness for the downtown because I've worked in the downtown for years, but you go anywhere in Leesburg and you can get good food.
Yeah, the Village has, I've had the conch takeout, and I love Indian food, so we've had Five Tarara also.
Yes.
And since there's really nobody driving down that road in the entrance anymore, I can actually park right in front of Five Tarara these days.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat. So what do you miss these days that, you know, COVID times, that it surprises you that you miss it so much?
Well, I miss my daughter a whole lot. She is out on the West Coast. And so we haven't seen each other since Christmas. And I was lucky to go out and visit her in Christmas, but we stay in touch. We'll do a Google Duo call. We text a lot every day, and we talk on the phone every day. But mostly, I think I miss the ability to go visit her or have her come visit us. That's probably the biggest thing. We've seen a lot more people coming out for walks. In some ways, it's gotten us out of our cars in some situations. I run into neighbors I didn't see that often, but they're out walking up to, you know, a park or Morven Park or Russ Nature Sanctuary. So actually, I do get to see some people more now. Yeah. Because our walking schedules coincide.
I know. I see people out and about walking all the time. I mean, especially like right before dinner or right after dinner. It's kind of neat. So there is a little bit of that. Not too bad. Yeah. Well, Supervisor Umstattd, thank you for taking the time with me today. I really appreciate your time. It was great chatting about your history there back in the Navy and CIA. You'll have to share a little bit more with me over lunch when we're post-COVID here.
That's one thing I miss, having lunch with you.
It'll be on me next time.
Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Umstattd. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, JC. You take care.
You too.